like so. It's a tiara.
You do wear it on your head. I just love finding new places to wear diamonds.
Marilyn Monroe's death was never a simple tragedy. Her passing was a pressure cooker of sex, power, and politics that still rattles its lid more than 60 years later, and tonight we are cracking it open. Midnight, August 4th, 1962. Sirens slash the Brentwood silence. A window lies shattered, and Marilyn is face down while a phone dangles like a final confession. Headlines ignited hours later, but the fuse was lit decades earlier. From Bobby and Jack Kennedy whispering on unsecured phones to Frank Sinatra huddling with mob boss Sam Giancana while Joe DiMaggio paced hotel hallways, every powerful man in her orbit had a stake in what happened that night. So, let's wind the reel back to Depression-era California, where a girl named Norma Jeane first learned applause could outrun despair. Back then, Marilyn was small, shy, and desperate to hear the words, "well done." While working at an aircraft plant factory floor in 1945, a photographer from Yank magazine spotted her smile, and the rest was history. One camera test turned into 5, and 5 turned into a modeling contract with the Blue Book agency. 20th Century Fox offered a 6-month option, and Norma Jeane shelved her birth name for something the publicity department thought would sparkle under neon. Marilyn Monroe was born. Within 7 years, ticket lines wrapped city blocks for Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and Parisian designer Jean-Louis stitched gowns so tight she needed smelling salts between takes. Joe DiMaggio, fresh from a thunderous baseball career, sent roses to her dressing room and proposed after 3 months. They married in San Francisco, with photographers climbing lampposts for the perfect shot. 9 months later, she filed for divorce, citing cruelty, though throughout her life she still phoned Joe whenever panic owned the night. Enter Dr. Ralph Greenson, a psychoanalyst whose living room couch had already hosted Tony Curtis, Vivian Leigh, and Sinatra's former wife, Ava Gardner. He disliked professional distance. He encouraged Marilyn to call him Uncle Ralph and screened her visitors like a nightclub bouncer. Working beside Greenson was Dr. Hyman Engelberg, who supplied Nembutal by the vial, and Dr. Leon Crone, who managed physical ailments, from ulcers to endometriosis. By 1958, the nightly routine involved chloral hydrate to fall asleep and Nembutal to stay asleep. Sets suffered delays, but producer Billy Wilder still insisted nobody else could deliver that lethal mix of innocence and innuendo for Some Like It Hot, a decision rewarded with record box office grosses. Executives convinced themselves the medical juggling act worked, while each refill tightened the net around her independence. What none of the doctors grasped was how often Marilyn studied pharmacology books between shoots, convinced she could calibrate her own chemistry better than any white-coated man. She highlighted passages on half-life calculations, jotted conversion ratios in the margins of hotel stationery, and tested the timing against her call sheets. This private research was her attempt at control, yet it also meant she trusted only herself to measure the line between calm and catastrophe. Behind the glamour curtain, politics brewed. Sinatra's Rat Pack parties at Peter Lawford's Santa Monica beach home blurred celebrity with statecraft. Through Lawford, Marilyn met Senator John Kennedy, already polishing a path to the White House. Telephone operators at the Beverly Hills Hotel soon forwarded late-night calls to the Oval Office itself. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover saw danger. Agents tailed Marilyn from beauty clinic to bookstore and filed memos titled Subject MM, Political Exposure. One entry claims she repeated details about missile deployments in Turkey. Whether she truly possessed secrets or merely echoed cocktail chatter, the possibility placed her squarely on Hoover's chalkboard. One night, at Lawford's beach house, the conversation drifted to Cuba, and Marilyn asked bluntly why the administration tolerated exile training camps on Florida marshland. The room went silent except for the ice, settling in highball glasses. Lawford laughed it off, but Giancana's Lieutenant Chucky Nicoletti reportedly phoned Chicago an hour later with a warning that the blonde posed a risk none of them could predict. Mob interest only sharpened the stakes. Sam Giancana wanted leverage in Havana casino ventures and believed access to the Kennedy brothers could grease that path. Sinatra, ever the pragmatic host, invited Giancana to the Cal Neva Lodge, notorious for nights that ended with shredded guest lists. Rumor says Giancana planted cameras in the ceiling and pointed them at anyone who might prove useful. Nothing concrete ever surfaced, but the very suggestion wrapped strings of menace around Marilyn's patio lights. Philly 62, Frank Sinatra grew uneasy that his weekend parties now felt like federal surveillance traps. He told club pianist Bill Miller that the air around Marilyn crackled with microphones, even when no band played. Miller swore Sinatra used the word hot potato and vowed to distance himself before the next election cycle. It was the first time in years Sinatra admitted fear, and the target was not Hoover or the mob. It was the woman everyone wanted on their side, yet no one could safely keep there. Joe DiMaggio watched from a wary distance. He disliked the new circle, especially after hearing that Marilyn asked Lawford about buying farmland as a retreat. Detectives hired by Joe tailed cars outside the 5th Helena Drive bungalow. He planned to propose remarriage after she finished Something's Gotta Give and believed he could shield her from city vipers. Marilyn never dismissed the idea. Photographs from their final lunch show her head resting gently on his shoulder, a picture of calm Hollywood seldom witnessed. Summer of 1962 became a carousel of hurried days and sleepless nights. 20th Century Fox fired Marilyn for chronic tardiness on Something's Got to Give, hired Lee Remick, then rehired Marilyn, after public outrage, crashed the studio switchboard. At a press conference in a green Pucci blouse, she promised to finish scenes ahead of schedule. Lawyers inserted penalty clauses. Stress cranked another notch. Studio memos from that week show executives debating an insurance rider that would pay out if production halted again. One line reads simply, odds of completion, 50-50. The underwriter demanded a daily medical report. Marilyn joked to makeup artist Whitey Snyder that she had become more valuable dead than alive. A gallows quip he later confessed kept him awake for years. Saturday, August 4th, started without alarm bells. Housekeeper Eunice Murray arrived at 8:30. Greenson conducted therapy at 9. Costume designer Jean-Louis delivered a peach-colored dress for Monday's call. At 1 o'clock, a black sedan parked at the gate. Some neighbors swear Robert Kennedy stepped out, wearing a casual sport coat, and argued with Marilyn on the patio. Robert's published itinerary shows he spoke in San Francisco at noon, then vanished from public view. Flight rosters confirm that a charter or military hop could cover the distance in 90 minutes. Conspiracy authors underline that coincidence in red ink. Minutes before that black sedan arrived, neighbor Minnie Boggs was trimming roses and remembers hearing a woman cry out, "Please not today." Boggs assumed it was a domestic spat from the house next door and turned up her radio. Investigators never interviewed her. She told the story only once, in a church seniors group 3 decades later, and died before reporters could follow up. Peter Lawford rang at 5:30. Marilyn sounded drowsy, muttered goodbye, and hung up. Lawford later said her tone felt final. He tried again, got no answer, and called Greenson. Murray prepared steak for dinner, but Marilyn only nibbled. Around 9:30, she carried a portable telephone into her bedroom. Midnight approached. Murray saw light under the door, knocked and heard nothing. Greenson rushed back, peered through a window, smashed it, and entered. He found Marilyn face down, nude, phone in hand. Murray phoned Engelberg, who declared death. Police did not receive the call until 4:35, nearly 3 hours later. Patrolmen found fresh sheets in the dryer, pill bottles lined in neat rows but no water glass. 47 Nembutal capsules were gone from a refill recorded 2 days earlier. Murray said a tumbler might have broken, yet no shards were found. Officers noted Greenson steered the conversation, reminding them the star deserved dignity. One rookie told a reporter he felt the house was already staged for photographs that would never be taken. Officer Jack Clemens later testified that a small brown notebook sat open on the nightstand when he first entered, but when photographers arrived 15 minutes later, the notebook had vanished. Clemens chased the detail for the rest of his career, filing 3 addendums that departmental supervisors refused to append to the official report. Coroner Thomas Noguchi ruled probable self-administered overdose based on blood readings, yet he recorded only minimal dye in the stomach, which was odd for 50 swallowed capsules. He also noted bruising on the hip and fresh abrasions on the back of one leg. Toxicologists debated whether such marks come from a fall or from being placed on a bed. Noguchi posed the question in his log, then marked the file closed. Reporters exploded. Columnist Dorothy Kilgallen called the scene a poorly written play. Confidential magazine hinted at hush money. Hoover issued a denial of political involvement, which only fed suspicion among Americans who remembered bureau misdirection in other scandals. Publicist Pat Newcomb insisted she saw Marilyn writing in a red leather diary 3 days earlier. Hairstylist Sidney Gilleroff swore the diary lived under the pillow. It never reached the evidence locker. One rumor claims CIA officer James Jesus Angleton removed it before dawn. Another blames Peter Lawford, under orders from the Kennedy family. Nobody produced proof. Decades later, a storage auction in Van Nuys produced a red calfskin cover wrapped in plastic, pages missing, but embossed with Marilyn's initials in gold. Authenticity could not be proven, yet the locker ledger showed it had belonged to a retired West Los Angeles patrol sergeant who worked the night shift in '62 and never spoke publicly about the case. Joe DiMaggio seized funeral arrangements. He banned studio heads, Kennedy allies, and every Rat Pack member. Only baseball friends, Sinatra's first wife Nancy, and publicist Arthur Jacobs carried the casket. The exclusion screamed louder than any eulogy. In 1972, Norman Mailer published Marilyn, a biography, proposing CIA involvement. 5 years later, Giancana was due at a Senate hearing about agency ties. He was shot the night before. The timing smelled of dramatic symmetry, if not confirmed motive. Los Angeles reopened the Monroe file in 1982. Deputy District Attorney Michael Carroll interviewed Murray again. Her timeline shifted for a fourth time. Carroll concluded suicide most likely, but conceded material contradictions remain. Tabloids printed one phrase, "Murder Revisited," and sold out before lunch. Mailer's publisher pushed an entire print run on the promise of new evidence, but off-record admitted the explosive chapter rested on a single, unnamed Hollywood chauffeur. That driver surfaced in the '80s, claimed his quote was fiction, then disappeared again. The episode illustrates how the market for Marilyn's mystery often rewarded rumor far more than verifiable fact. And in 2003, Dr. Cyril Wecht assembled toxicologists. They suggested chloral hydrate could numb a victim enough for forced administration of Nembutal without visible trauma. They highlighted a lack of rigor mortis in first response photos, indicating time of death later than official estimates. Network specials followed, and memorabilia prices jumped. Netflix entered the arena in 2022 with The Mystery of Marilyn Monroe. Private investigator Fred Otash, recorded decades earlier, claimed Robert Kennedy visited twice that day, bringing ex-policeman Jack Clemens on the second trip. Clemens, the original responding officer, had long whispered about irregularities. The documentary ended by teasing upcoming Kennedy document releases, promising more upheaval. Scholars framed Marilyn as an early casualty of patriarchal systems. Professor Sarah Churchwell argued that branding her unstable served institutions more than seeking truth. Her lecture toured universities and public television, adding fresh vocabulary to an old debate. Beloved playwright Arthur Miller belongs in this tale. He met Marilyn while she was still bound by studio contracts. She carried his photograph through Korea during USO tours. She converted to Judaism for their 1956 wedding and settled in rural Connecticut, where neighbors saw her bake banana bread and weed a small garden. Miller wrote The Misfits specifically for her, gifting her a role that captured disillusion as art. On set, in the Nevada desert, she collapsed often from heat and exhaustion, needing oxygen between takes. Clark Gable died days after wrapping, adding sorrow and superstition to an already haunted picture. Their marriage fractured soon after, leaving her adrift but determined to claim creative control, a battle that would end unfinished. Private notebooks from the Connecticut period show attempts to quit sleeping pills. She wrote, "I will greet the sunrise today," and marked calendars whenever she lasted an entire night without medication. The tally seldom exceeded 4, yet it reveals an artist fighting addiction long before society spoke of recovery programs. In June of her final year, photographer Bert Stern booked a suite at the Bel Air Hotel for Vogue. The session, later marketed as The Last Sitting, mixed champagne, silk scarves, and raw vulnerability. She giggled between frames and asked Stern to destroy negatives she disliked. He kept them, later selling full sets for millions. The breach confirmed her suspicion that privacy was a myth. Cultural reactions keep evolving. Older viewers once framed her fate as moral caution. Younger activists in the 1970s saw cover-up of establishment crime. Feminist students in the 1990s reframed Marilyn as a prototype of exploited female labor. Each era tacks on meaning, ensuring the mystery adapts to current fears. In 2024, a deep learning firm demoed a hologram that placed Marilyn beside Elvis in a virtual duet of blue suede shoes. The audience gasped, then argued for weeks online about ethical resurrection. Commentators noted the performance drew more viewers than the Oscars broadcast that year, proof that even a simulated heartbeat from Marilyn can hijack global attention. Lee Strasberg controlled her estate until his death. Then his widow, Anna, licensed her image for vodka ads, fragrance campaigns, and digital de-aging demos. Fans protested that a woman who battled studio merchandising now sold champagne and luxury watches. The estate replied that revenue funds acting grants. The contradiction sparks new podcasts every season. Artificial intelligence firms unveiled voice synthesis in 2024, reproducing her breathy phrasing with unnerving accuracy. Ethics boards questioned reviving a person who never signed consent forms for such uses. The debate took on sharper edges because Marilyn's cause of death remains contested. Even her neighboring crypt generates headlines. Joe DiMaggio bought the space directly above hers as eternal guardian. Yet in 1992, magazine publisher Hugh Hefner purchased the plot to her west and was interred there in 2017. Editorials asked if perpetual proximity was tribute or trespass, proof that talk of her still sells papers. The National Archives holds Kennedy documents scheduled for release in 2027. Researchers expect meeting minutes from May 15, 1962, mentioning a Hollywood contact. If her name appears even once, headlines will roar worldwide. If absent, defenders of the official story will claim vindication, while skeptics will insist sensitive pages remain sealed. Museums prepare a centennial retrospective for 2026 featuring letters, costumes, and restored footage from Something's Got to Give. Curators hint at negotiations to display diary fragments should any authenticated pages surface. Black market whispers place scraps in European vaults. Auction houses quietly solicit provenance. So, when admirers gather every first week of August, they bring roses, but they also carry questions. They ask why coroners treated Hollywood differently from any other county. They ask whether present mental health awareness would have saved her. They ask if the nation lost more than an actress, perhaps losing a witness to webs of power still hidden. Look again at the bare list. Duplicate prescriptions. A locked door, yet a broken window. No water glass. Sheets spinning in a dryer. Phone logs missing. Diary missing. Timelines mutating. Political interests converging. Federal surveillance confirmed. A coroner's summary that fits and does not fit. Half a century of unanswered letters. When jigsaw pieces refuse to align after 6 decades, either the picture is incomplete or someone tilted the board. Hollywood keeps birthing new icons, but when modern stars stumble, reporters still invoke Marilyn as warning. She remains the central switchboard where glamour, trauma, and conspiracy share a single wire. Your continued attention proves her aura outlived every manager, doctor, and power broker who tried to control it. Stay alert as archives unseal. Notice when an aging aide passes away without disclosing memoirs. Listen for discovery of dusty reel-to-reel tapes once thought erased. Each faint clue inches us toward an answer, yet each answer might open another corridor. Mystery survives on curiosity, and you, now armed with names, dates, motives, and contradictions, are part of the investigation. Marilyn pleaded for the world to see the woman behind the mirror. In death, she forces us to inspect the alliances behind the spotlight. Whether she fell alone or was pushed, her story dares every generation to guard human dignity against systems that profit from a smile and then shrug at a funeral. Keep asking who removed the diary, who delayed the police, and why the federal director of investigation cared so deeply about a movie star's address book. Until those questions stop echoing through Fifth Helena Drive, the brightest casualty of Hollywood will never dim, and the case once stamped closed will never truly rest.